Hello paintballers, this is Luke from paintballerx.com. Today I am going to show you how to change out the seals or the O-rings that come in the Paintballer X O-ring kit, or the majority of the ones in the kit. Today I have on the bench a Spyder Xtra. This is the 2009 edition of the Spyder Xtra. So first thing that you're going to do before you actually start taking it apart, make sure that you don't have air on it. Make sure that the gun is not loaded. And most of all, make sure that there's no air on it. You don't want to take it apart when it's pressurized. What you will do is you're going to pull up on the bolt release and pull out the actual bolt. You have the Delrin bolt right there. Next, put your thumb over the velocity adjuster or the velocity plug. And this model has a ball bearing tension pin encapsulating all of the internal guts of the gun. So set that aside. And then, because if you don't hold on to this, if you don't hold on to the plug, the velocity spring will cause it all to shoot out. So you have your velocity adjuster or velocity plug, you have your velocity spring, and you have a buffer that's inside there, and that just takes some of the tension off of the actual velocity plug from the recoil from your striker going back and forth. Right there's the plug. I usually use just a small Allen wrench or Allen key, hex key that comes with it to do that. Next, grab an Allen wrench or a key and just put it down into the actual striker. I don't know if you can actually see it in the video, but there's a hole where the bolt actually catches the striker. I use the Allen wrench to pull that striker back. And there is the striker itself. And here is the striker O-ring. This is the most important O-ring when it gets dry or cracked, or if it's just not lubricated well, so it's too dry, it will cause your paintball marker or your Spyder to start fluttering, as it's called. It does that also when it runs out of air, runs low on air. It'll start to flutter. Makes it sound like it's full auto. And just make sure to catch the actual bolt to stop it from fluttering. Otherwise, you'll just break a bunch of paint. So, first thing, I just always replace that O-ring right there. Right here is one of our silicone O-rings out of our kit. Put the striker right there. Next, I'm going to start disassembling the front end of the marker. What I like to do is to take off the expansion chamber or the gas-through grip. I like to first take off the ASA. These screws are a little bit tight, but you want them to be tight so that way the tank doesn't wobble around as you're shooting. I like to take off the ASA or your air mount just because it's easier to actually turn this out of the gun. Turn your in this case, the gas-through grip out of the gun. And then just take off this O-ring. I'm going to set it over here. And this is going, you'll feel a noticeable difference in the firmness of the O-rings. This one is going to take the firmest of the O-rings. So put that on that seal right there. Now there is a small O-ring, this O-ring right here, on the ends of this hose. And what that'll do is, I usually don't take that apart unless there is a visible or a noticeable leak. from there, you can if you want to, but I usually don't because it normally doesn't go bad unless somebody's actually taking it apart and playing with it. So just a heads up on that. Now we have the low pressure chamber, or the LPC. This is going to take the larger of the Spyder Allen wrenches that comes with the marker. And you got another O-ring right here. You take one of these black O-rings and put that right there on that. What this chamber is for is when you're running compressed air, it allows air pressure to build up in the front of the gun faster, especially if you're running like a low output pressure regulator on your tank, because Spyders generally their operating pressure is around 750 psi, which a low output compressed air regulator is normally right around 450 psi per shot. So if you don't keep the air pressure high enough, it'll start to drown out your gun. And it'll be real noticeable when it does it. Okay, so now I'm taking off the actual grip frame. You always want to be careful so that way you don't strip out the heads of these screws. They're a pain in the butt to remove if you actually strip out the head of them. Normally it involves taking a Dremel tool and cutting a slot in it, or taking a screw extractor. There we go. Okay, so here is the trigger frame. Okay, underneath the trigger frame you have, this is actually your valve body plug set screw right there, and then you have your vertical ASA, or your vertical adapter. Your vertical adapter is what actually retains your cup seal, which is the second most important seal on the gun. Now the cup seal generally shouldn't have any kind of issues unless you're actually taking it apart. This is the cup seal itself. How it gets issues is if it'll start leaking if you start hearing a hiss come down the barrel while the gun is cocked and there's air on it, but you're not pulling the trigger, and you hear a hiss coming down the barrel, it's because your cup seal or your valve itself, which is inside there, is leaking. And the way of avoiding leaks with your cup seal is don't remove it unless you absolutely have to, because the slightest little ding on the edge of the cup seal can cause it to start to leak and hiss. This is your vertical adapter. We're going to replace these two O-rings right here. I actually took these O-rings off in the wrong order. Okay, so there's the vertical adapter. Here's the cup seal spring. I'm just going to put that back along with the cup seal. I'm going to reassemble all this to make sure that it doesn't go anyplace. Okay, let's pull that valve out real quick. Now the valve is a very touchy part of the gun. You don't want to nick the O-rings or the edge of the valve itself. This is that plug that I was telling you about. Now when you're pushing that valve out, you want to use something that's soft. I just realized that I don't have a wooden dowel on me, so I'm using this plastic box cutter. And you want to push from the striker side out, because it's this side right here that you don't want dinged up. This side, the striker side, it's being impacted by the front of this, so it can take a little bit more abuse than this side, the cup seal side. So also when you push it out, make sure that you don't have anything hard underneath where it'll land. I'm just going to stick that in there like that and just gently push it out. Because I don't want this side right here with the bigger opening to get damaged in any way. So now we have, this is the striker side. It'll be the one that's beveled down so it can catch the actual striker as it's impacting the pin that is on the front of, or the back end of the actual cup seal. Now we're going to replace these O-rings. I don't know why Spyder or Kingman did this, but they put two different O-rings on their valves when really they only needed, you know, the one type of O-ring. I guess both these O-rings are urethane O-rings, and they only put the urethane O-ring on the side that's going to have consistent pressure, which is the cup seal side. I like to have a urethane O-ring on both sides. Okay, so now that that O-ring is in there, one thing that I always try to do is, you can't really see it in the camera here, but there will be a line on the edge of it that is showing, if you look down into the actual chamber, there's a roll pin that goes all the way down there, and that holds this from going too far backwards. And I try to line that, that's what that mark is on the actual valve body. I like to put that back in there, that same direction, so that way it doesn't, well, that way there is absolutely no issues with lining it up. We're going to put some oil on these O-rings on the valve. Just good to keep it oiled. So I'm going to put that line on the top and just going to put the valve back into the marker itself. Make sure that you have the right side facing the right side, the bigger opening. The crisper opening on the valve body is going to be pointing forward where the cup seal is, and just gently push it in. And notice that my plug hole didn't line up properly. Just ease it back in to the proper alignment. And now, Spyder doesn't normally put any kind of sealant on these plugs. I like to put at least a wrap of Teflon tape on the plug itself. You got to make sure that you don't get any of it on the inside of the valve, because you don't want it to plug up the actual valve itself. So we're just going to put a wrap on there real quick. Sorry, I'm not doing it on camera. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get any of the Teflon tape on the top portion. Okay, can't really see it too well on there, but put a wrap on there of it, and then just gently, this is another screw that you want to make sure doesn't get over tightened, or you don't want to strip out the head. Got a little excess Teflon tape that's coming out on this side. You want it to come out on this side. You don't want it to come out on the inside. Okay, so now our valve is back inside there. Now we can actually start reassembling everything. I like to put oil on the majority of these O-rings. You don't have to put any on the cup seal itself. Okay. You just want to make sure that the actual cup seal pin is sticking through the valve. Gotta make sure I put the right screws where they go. Okay, so that's on there. I put a little light oil on LPC. I like to hand screw them in to start, just so that way you don't have to worry about them getting a you don't want to counter screw the threads. Okay. And actually, before I put the actual trigger frame on, I'm going to reassemble the striker and the bolt assembly. This one, I put quite a bit of oil on it, because this is the one that's going to determine your game. And usually, it's recommended that you oil this on the day that you go and play. Every time on that, well, not every time you play, but on that day. You don't want it to get dry. So first thing when you get to the field, or first thing in the morning before you play, oil that O-ring. This video is going to run a little bit longer than what I had planned. But, oh well. It's for educational purposes, right? Okay. There. The striker and the bolt are all assembled correctly. Now I am going to put the trigger frame back on. You don't have to screw these down with any kind of monster grip. Just enough where the actual trigger frame is not moving. The amount of times that I have to fix customer paintball guns that they've stripped out the head of these screws. Okay, now we are going to put these back in here. I'm not going to fully tighten them because I'm not going to take this out and play right now, but I'll explain to you. Now we have 4 O-rings that are left over. Like I said, these 2 smaller ones go to the hose, which I usually don't replace unless there's actually, you can actually hear or see an actual leak. And then these 2, since this is the universal kit, some of the Spyders have 1 to 2 O-rings on top of their bolt, and these 2 go to that. So here's my pile of used O-rings, and I hope that works for you. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@paintballerx.com. And until the next video, I hope this was informational for you. Thank you all. Bye.